folklore collector and filmmaker from Wexford in at home. He basically had done, a BA in fine art and specialising in video and performances at Limerick School of Art and Design, and then he did his master's in film and screenwriting. So he has a lot of strings to his bow, because he's not just good with the technical side of things, excuse me, but he's been following various countries or various projects around the country while he collects folklore, collects ordinary kind of people's lives and traditions and superstitions and customs that we might be in danger of losing if somebody like him didn't collect them. He's also the designer of our beautiful calendars that we have in the store. We had them last Christmas as well, and this year the Irish dresser collection. So Michael, I'm delighted to welcome you for a special kind of St. Patrick's Day, even though we won't focus just on St. Patrick's Day, but we're all excited to hear more about your work. So very welcome.
Brilliant. Listen, and thanks a million for having me, and thanks to all the people who are joining in and listening. Listen, what I want to do with you this evening is just have a kind of a chat for about 35 minutes about what I do and where I'm coming from and what drives me and the ways that I work. If you were to ask me about if you'd said to me, do a talk on Easter folklore, I could talk for 3 hours on it. If you asked me to do a talk on Banshee folklore, I could talk for 3 hours on it. So what I'm going to do is give you a bit of an overview of a practice, really, and get you thinking. But I'll focus on a few different bits and pieces. I'll look at a little bit on Easter and May. I won't go into any great depth in it, but then I'll look at maybe some kind of classic kind of I suppose ghost stories or folklore regarding the fairies and the banshee and that kind of stuff. And I suppose just about how important people are in the stories that I collect, right? So I'm going to share my screen with you. So I'll be coming backwards and forwards, share my screen if that's okay. And if you're doing me a favor, if you have any questions, don't be afraid to throw them into the chat. And if we can answer them as I'm going along, or we can have a chat at the end and throw any kind of questions to me. So sit back and just listen to a little introduction to what I do and to get you thinking about a different way of working with regards to the area around collecting folklore and stuff. Now listen, if you can see my screen there, I grew up on the coast of Wexford. Now it's an interesting one. I grew up here in the Gaelic McMurrough territory of North Wexford and South Wicklow. And I suppose I grew up in a house on the coast here, and I grew up listening to stories and yarns about different things that happened and different things that didn't happen, and things that you would do and things that you wouldn't do when you do certain things at a certain time of year, and you had beliefs that you did. I just grew up with those things, like so many people in Ireland, and we just didn't know what they were. We just did them, right? And in some ways, and I don't think my mother or even my grandmother would have ever heard of the word folklore. They wouldn't even know what it was. I'll be perfectly honest with you. They would have left school 12, 13, 14 and got on with their lives, went working, and then got married and had children and just lived their lives like so many people did. But the idea of them having a chance to reflect on their lives wasn't the case at all. They wouldn't have had the time or the luxury to be able to do that. We're able to look back now. I was of the generation, and probably the first generation to go on to third level in my family, and it was a big thing because from a farm labouring background, it was a step. Education was a step in which you could get you up into a level playing field with people who were around you who are strong farmers or small farmers, and it was a bit of a definitely a level playing field. But one thing for me, even as an interest, going through art college in Galway and Limerick, I suppose a feeding ground to the practice that I had were, I suppose, in some ways, people. And I was always interested in the performance of the everyday things that we did. And here, like I studied fine art, and in particular, performance and video, contemporary conceptual performance and video. And I was seeing performers acting and performing, doing live artworks. And I was always interested in the performance of the everyday things that people do, the rituals people would do, sometimes unknowns to themselves. And one of the things that I suppose that I developed in 95, 96, going into art college, was I picked up a video camera. And I picked up a video camera, and straight away I could see the potential to use this very simple tool to be able to, almost like as a looking glass, to hold up to record the lives of ordinary people. And one of the things which was very different in the video camera was the video camera differed greatly than a film camera. And film meant you were connected to a production company, you were connected to a television station, and all those things. As you know, rightly in the States, video offered you a chance to record your home videos, to record stuff and produce at a very, very low and at a very cheap level. And even though I was producing work for years, I would produce work and share work and film festivals and this, that, and the other, I was still using the tools of video. Now, here's the gas thing. I'm holding up my hand here. I'm holding up something that changed all that, even in the last 10 years, the advent of the smartphone. And the smartphone not only meant that we could record and document our ordinary people's lives, it also meant we had a place in which to share them. And that was an absolute huge game changer in this area of work. And I'll touch on that later on with regards to the sharing of content and the allowing of other people to be part of that conversation. Now, one thing which is kind of, I suppose, for me, and I hope is, if you look at this photograph, 2 women up in Mayo, 2009, I think, or 2008, I would have recorded it. I start to use the video camera as a tool to record folklore, the same stuff that I heard my mother and father and grandmother talking about, but I wanted to record other people's stuff and to chat, to record, and to share. And the reason I used a video camera to do that was because I kind of felt, and I found in academic circles as well, there was a removal of people from the stories. And it's great that we can go online and we can learn about a story, but sometimes I think there's something deeply missing when we just have the story. I think when you're missing out on a person's accents, their mannerisms, and their messing, and all those fantastic human characteristics which are part of it. Without those things, these stories would not exist. They just become stories that you could read in a book. Right, and that to me was one of the keys of it, right? And one of the things which a lot of people miss out on, and which I grew up with, was entertainment was huge with regards in one aspect of folklore. And if you tell a child about not picking up the banshee's comb because the banshee will come after you, there's an entertainment value, there's a scare factor in it. There's entertainment was huge, and Irish people have I'll play a little video for you in a while. Irish people have an awful habit of telling you a story and then winking at the same time to you, right? Now, that subtlety is lost on some people. I'm sure some of you will get it, but that idea of telling you something and winking at the same time, knowing that, listen, hang on. And that's what's absolutely lovely about, for me, that's what's lovely about using the video camera. And for 20 years, over 20 years now, that's the one of the real strong parts of my practice that I have is the recording and collecting of folklore, customs, beliefs, words, sayings, that kind of rich territory. And normally on a very technical side, I'd have 2 people together in this kind of scenario. And as I said to you, this is a setup that I would have had back in 2004, 5, 6 onwards. And I'd be using a video camera like this, but in the last 10 years, something like this thing here, mobile phone. Right? And that's been an absolute game changer, right? One thing as well, people said to me when I remember starting this first, oh, no one will talk to you in front of the camera, Mick, they're going to be too shy. And it was usually the people who were telling me that were the ones that didn't have the skills to do it. And you can understand the reason why they wouldn't do it, why they had that thing as well. They were saying, oh, this is going to remove the intimacy of the thing. But it didn't. It didn't remove it at all, because you're there. And once you're there, and if you're connected to those 2 people or 3 people in front of you, then the thing is real and the people are real and you're sharing. And one of the things that I found, and I always find it, is everyone leaves themselves a little bit bare in these situations because you're opening yourself up. And I'm opening myself up and leaving myself vulnerable. And I'll tell people a story that I heard, or something that neighbor heard someone else told, or something another county, and they go, yes, I heard something like that as well. And then, right? So it's a 2-way street. And for years, I would have always edited myself out of those chats. Nowadays, it's changed slightly, just the volume of production of the work. But in the past, I had the luxury of a little bit more of time. What I might do is I might let you have a listen to 1 or 2 clips, and I'll keep going backwards and forwards, and we'll just keep this lovely, loose and informal, if that's okay, right? So I'm just going to whoosh that thing out of the way, and I've got some things to show you. Now, hopefully this will all work for me. I pulled a pile of videos over on the desktop because I said, sometimes I don't know what humor will come on me, and it'll depend on what humor I'm in to what I'll show, right? But this is a little small compilation from Mayo and Offaly, just to give you the sense of the kind of, especially when you're dealing with beliefs and customs, or beliefs in particular, what people believe. Because when you talk about your belief, you're leaving yourself a little bit open. But we're able to dice that in Ireland a little bit. We're able to go between the serious and the funny and kind of get away with it, that kind of way. So here's this little bit for you. 3 minutes long.
And another thing is too, you know, say New Year's, you know, say after Christmas, New Year's Day.
New Year's Day.
There were some people that wouldn't want a woman going in first into the house.
Oh no, to be a black-haired
It
man.
had to be a man.
And they wouldn't want a red-haired woman.
A red-haired
Sure. So the video is slow.
Woman.
You'd have no look.
You turn back from the fair if they were going at up at 6 o'clock. Haired woman that drive the cattle back.
That's right.
If you were out in the bog with and there'd be headers and everything like that, and one minute it'd be smooth as everything because actually this push would come, and they say that was the fairies crossing across.
Yeah, that's fairy crossing. Yeah, that's right.
Fairy crossing the header. And you're never supposed to cross the path again. It's the dangers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the open fire, that's another thing. If a coal fell backwards, that was a visitor coming.
Mm.
Yeah, that's the
And
old
if
people like that.
the fire kind of sparkled out and you said there were money was coming to you.
Money or fight.
Money, I heard.
There was fight too put into it, which wasn't good. Yeah.
And some people hated a frog coming into the house.
That's
Other
right.
people
The sign
hated
of rain too.
no, the sign of death.
Is it?
Yeah.
Or a robin?
And when the robin, I don't know, but down our west was a frog.
A robin. Up our way.
It's a cock crows 3 times.
That was
What?
That was when.
No, but that's what they were saying. If you hear a cock 3 times, remember, Lord heard that there's a person in the way out, them dying. Oh yeah, there's some terrible yarns years ago. Of course, we were all so innocent. We thought took it in. We're really, but nowadays the young people wouldn't swallow things like that.
They're too cute now.
Oh, they're so cute.
You know, another thing, I shouldn't be telling this all this, but put a bit of wool into the wall for, if I say this, you guys have to, is it a pair in shoes or a pair in stockings for the banousel? Did you hear that?
No. What's a banousel?
A weasel. What's wrong with you?
Oh.
Because the weasel won't come in and bring your chickens in summertime.
Oh,
Is that good?
And she's probably.
Oh, did you ever hear of the
Summertime.
fudge in Mara? Well, wait till I tell you now. It happened to myself. There's different tellings up here in Mayo than at home. But it's supposed to be, it's a thing in the field. You can, now I could see the light of my own house and their house, but I still couldn't get to the stile where I wanted to get out. I was going round and I'd be in that corner and that corner. But I had always heard that if I turned whatever I had on me inside out, but once I had turned inside out, I found the style, no problem. But that is true.
The white thorn bush is supposed to be very unlucky. It's to touch it even. And if you touch a white thorn bush, you never look for the rest of your days. Yeah. And I suppose that it does happen. We mightn't think it, but when you look back and believe.
Sorry.
Definitely.
Just heard it the truth now.
Yeah.
And God bless
Yes.
you.
I get stiff when I sit down.
Oh, I don't be able to get up.
That was great. Now, thanks very much.
Now, sorry about the breakup in video quality there, right? But what I love, and I hope you really got it too, was I love the relationship between the people. And I suppose that to me was absolutely, it's precious. And someone will say, up our way we thought it was a robin, it was bad looking, and down there it was a frog. And even to pair up people and they'd never get a chance to be able to have those conversations at all is lovely. And that contradiction, and anyone who grew up in an Irish household, you'd always know my mother would say it was a fine day, my grandmother would say it was a wet day, and you know, not never, that's just the way it went on. But it's lovely. And the end clip where the two men, one of the men says now, he told a lovely story about a fairy, cutting down a lone white thorn, which he said was a fairy tree, classic fairy tree story. And then he said, what I told you is the truth now. And then he winks at me, and then he gets up and says, I can't, you know. So there's a lovely element of play there. And it's a really interesting one just for you to watch yourselves, and I hope you get it, is that the entertainment value, especially when I shared them back in the local halls, back in the days when you're sharing them back in the halls, they could be talking about the most serious thing but they're all bursting themselves laughing at it, right? So it depends on what audience you share this content at. You could be showing it at a university somewhere in Germany, and people are reading it as factually what's going on here, what's the relationship of this story, or is it a cross-European story, so people get different things out of each story, but the entertainment thing is definitely very strong, and I suppose that's why these things existed, and it wouldn't have existed unless that was the case. So that's the scenario, folks, for that kind of recording. There's no end to it. That's all early recording that it shows you there. You never heard my voice in it. And you could construct any kind of narrative based on the little clips you'd get. And it's lovely work to do. It's very labor intensive. I've got 15 years of old material on DVDs, which is they're obsolete now at this stage, but all on hard drives here. 70, 80 terabytes of hard drives of content. Probably the biggest digital video collection of folklore in Ireland, of recorded visual in the country, right? It's just time is the big thing, right? To get it and process it. But that's the kind of scenario, ones and twos. Sorry about my thing here, is because my computer is live here. But one thing I just want to show you was I produced DVDs back in the day, where you'd have a collection of calendar lore, popular superstitions, personal experiences. And you'd produce these, and if it depends on the budget you'd have, you'd give out 50 for free, 100 for free, with the idea that these stories were back circulating in the communities and where they came from. And that was the idea. And that has always been, I suppose, in some ways, we're coming into folklore and heritage from an art side. Even though underlying I'm coming from where I'm coming from, that's always going to be there. But what you would have studied. So if you look on this ground here, I took a snap here a couple of years ago of just project. Like I would have 3-4 projects on the go at any one time. We produce what we call project work. In the art world now it's called socially engaged practice, but we just still call it project work. So all these would be collections, mostly traditional folklore collections, some traditional song collections, some place-based project work where we produce mapping-based work, or publications. Just there's no end to it. All working on small budgets, small produced stuff, very, very localized stuff. And my practice has been the same for 20 years. It's still the same kind of practice. It's changed slightly. There's a few different strands to it, but there's a very strong online presence to it now. But that has always been there, and the idea of actually, if I'm collecting material, to share it back to the people. It's not mine. I found a little bit in the art sometimes that there was a taking of content, and even in the academic world, the taking of content and bringing it into, it's grand for a presentation at a conference in Helsinki or somewhere like that, that kind of way. But it missed the point, and people are really important to me because it's where I came from, and I wouldn't feel right not doing it and not including them in that story. So that's the kind of content you'd produce the whole time. And here was the rock and roll lifestyle. I'd be off showing films at a film festival in Germany, and realistically where my heart was the village halls, daycare centres, nursing homes, and all you would need. And here's the gas thing, folks. Even back then, I remember leaving Limerick, Art College in Limerick, and I left Limerick in 2001. And I remember a curator, he spent some time in New York, and he said to me, to make it now, you're going to have to go to Berlin or New York. And I said, I had no interest in going to Berlin or New York. I'm not just any of you over there in New York, but I had no interest personally. I wanted to go back to home to Wexford. And there was one thing which is a game changer, was the advent of the internet. All I needed was a computer, a laptop, and access to the internet, right? And now we've seen with the advent of COVID how that's completely changed. Who would have thought I'd be talking to you 2 years ago in this context? It's incredible how it's changed. I use this tool, Zoom, for field recording. I could be field recording someone in Newfoundland tomorrow night, and I'm using this tool. So our whole world has opened up, and we're connecting more like we've never done before. We're joining up dots like we've never done before. So it's a very, very interesting time, I find, right? And especially for the ground level stuff. So here was me sharing this content. Like, this is a gorgeous collection we did in Limerick City. It was called The Banshee Lives in the Handball Alley. And there was a handball alley in St. Mary's Park. A handball alley was a kind of a four-cornered space built around the 1920s, 30s, started at freeze of the new state. And it was a game called handball, like the Basques have a version of it. And everywhere you go in Ireland, the Banshee was all seen there, right? There was always the Banshee was associated with handball alleys because they were probably where lads were down drinking, and sometimes were during 1916 Rising in Wexford and in Ascarty, the men used to meet there to exchange guns and weapons. So it was always this kind of a little bit of a dodgy space. So all the kids in Limerick, when we did this project years ago, had the story that the Banshee lived in the handball alley, and if you touch the four corners and said the Hail Mary backwards, you come up, she'd haunt you. So we do a collection of all the gorgeous, absolutely lovely Limerick accents, urban, completely urban, not rural, and then did the screening back in the handball alley. And you could do it in the Project Art Centre in Dublin, or you could do it in the handball alley in Limerick. And my heart is always in those spaces. That's just the way I am. But here's one thing, and which is an important one in the sharing of stuff. About 6 years ago, my other half here was using Facebook, for just using, like probably yourselves. And I had no real interest in it. And she said to me, will you ever stop looking at my page and get your own page, right? So I said, right, I'll have to bite the bullet and do this, right? So I started to use it, and I didn't know how I'd use this yoke at all. And I started to use it, and straight away I started to realize, geez, there's a massive space here, right? So I used to start to put up, you know, kind of personal stuff. I treat it like an open studio. So I said, this is like an open artist studio. And I literally would put up absolutely localized content. Like, here's a lovely tradition about neighbors would gift themselves a Christmas block at Christmas, a block at Christmas in this part of Wexford. A complete field recording little stories, but straight away people would connect to it. And this could, someone in Donegal would go, God, I did that. Or my mother, someone in office, and my mother does that, right? So, sorry, I'll come back. So what it meant was I had all this absolutely rich, gorgeous local content, but I had the visuals and I had the accents, right? And I had the tools to be able to do it. And I started to use Facebook for that tool, right? And I just start sharing content. And on average, I would get only 3,000 to 10,000 views on a video, getting an average 500,000 to 3.4 million interactions every 4 weeks on absolutely home produced local material. And that's the gas thing as well. So there's a huge appetite for the local that wasn't really being catered for by the big guys, right? And what's amazing as well, and you'll probably notice over in New York, you probably have connected back to here now in ways you've never connected before. I know that we've connected, and me here, and us in Wexford, I've got a huge connection to Newfoundland. We've connected back to the people who left here in the 1790s in Newfoundland, the families in Newfoundland. We're just absolutely completely joined up through just this process, right? So it's an amazing tool, right? And it's brilliant for that kind of content. And as I said to you, what is lovely about it is I can share words and sayings and beliefs, and then people will come back and say, God, we did a version of that and this, that, and the other, right? Now, how am I doing for time? I'm okay for another loads, yeah. So as I said to you, I could pick anything and any subject and talk to you about it, right? But I don't have the luxury of time. But just when you're there, just to give you a little overview, I loaded up a Facebook page just to show you folks, right? Now, there's a page that I set up called folklore.ie. And I bought folklore.ie, and it literally is coming in, it's a live page here. But I would use it for putting up that lovely local Irish content. So I put up a video today of a man who basically talked about going in and cutting sticks off a fairy fort and getting stung 7 times on his chest. And he went in the next day with a bottle of holy water and he blessed it. I put up a video of these women from Tipperary there today talking about putting throwing blessed salt on a calf when it was born and putting an egg into its mouth. Like, they were put up this morning. That's 5,500 views, 2.2. You know, so it's incredible for that localized content, and that's what's amazing about it. And it's a great way. And there's more people, there's more practitioners working like this. So that's what I would use. I'd use Facebook in particular, and I don't use Instagram really, because the age profile, I don't know what it's like in America, but the age profile in Ireland, the target audience for me is 40 to about 90. And I find actually it's 60 to 90 is the age profile who are accessed. You wouldn't believe the amount of older people in rural Ireland and in the cities and towns, especially in rural Ireland, who found the social media is a really powerful tool to connect. And just to show you, if I would put up a little thing like this, and even a photograph of, you know, anyone who's got a child of Prague will know that it's not lucky to have it without the head broken off it, you know. And straight away, there was a man from Limerick one day, there a couple of weeks ago, he was telling me, I put this up one night, 28th of January, I put it up. And he says his kids in Limerick said the head broke off. And this might be a bit sacrilegious for some of you, but he said they used to love it because he used to use it to draw hopscotch in the streets of Limerick and for the children to bounce, jump around on, right? But what's amazing is you had 187 comments there, and you can do a thesis, or you can start doing a PhD, you know, on what the content is coming back, right? So that's that kind of content. Now I'm going to park that, and that's the kind of process in which you work. And then we'll show you some stuff and entertain you for a little bit, right? And just talk about some nice stuff, right? Come here. We're coming close to Easter, and I said we came from St. Patrick's Day. I'll look at you for a minute, right? We just came from St. Patrick's Day. We're still in Lent here in Ireland, probably as it is in America. And St. Patrick's Day, tons of folklore around St. Patrick's Day. The biggest one of all was to get your spuds in. That was the biggest one all over the country. You had to get your potatoes in by the 17th. Mammy and Emma home would always say the 17th of March was the date for the spuds. And you'd plant them then by a date called the 29th of June, which was St. Peter and Paul's Day. So in by the 17th, out by the 29th, or you taste them by the 29th. So, and really when you think about it in our calendar, like our whole year in Ireland, and it is, our calendar dates make sense. You know, they make sense for reasons. You know, they're dates for to tell us when to do things, plant the spuds. We had dates, the 22nd or 3rd of April was a date called the cuckoo oats. If you didn't plant your oats by then, you became known as a cuckoo farmer because the cuckoo would arrive and you had to get your oats in. And it's a lovely one as well, even to see the geography of the country. Down in the more southern counties, for anything from, say, Offaly downwards, the 17th and the 29th were the dates, but I found up in North Meath and up in Ulster, the date for digging the spuds changed to the 12th. So I came across a lovely saying where one man said, you'd plant with Paddy and dig with Billy. So you've got two pivotal, you know, Prince Billy on 12th and you plant with Paddy. So there you go, there's an integration for you with the humble spud. So there's loads of things around St. Patrick's and Lent. One of the things which is a great thing around coming into Lent is you remember Pancake Tuesday, Shrove Tuesday, we had all your pancakes. There was no eating of eggs, no eating of, you know, meat. But we have a lovely tradition here in Wexford, and it's found around the country as well. And maybe it went to Newfoundland, it went to Australia, it went to New Zealand. A lovely little word called a gug for an egg. It's a little from the Irish that survives, right? And we have a little tradition here called gugging for eggs. And come now Easter Saturday, Holy Saturday, day before Easter Sunday, we will go out now. Not very many people do it as much as they used to do it, but children will go out and look for eggs off their neighbours. In the past, you were looking for hen eggs and duck eggs, but nowadays you'd be looking for chocolate eggs and that kind of stuff. And the gas thing is almost I'll show you a little video in a second. And that was done here. We dressed up a little bit in Wexford, that whole with a kind of that Mummin tradition, which went to America with the Halloween tradition. But you'll find in other parts of the country as well where they'll have clue dogs where they'll go out and they collect the eggs and they'll boil them up on that Easter Saturday and Easter Sunday and on Easter Monday. Little picnics outside and have little there's loads to do at Easter. But I'll show you this little video. I'm going to share my screen with you and show you a little video. And as I said, I could talk for Ireland, lads, and I've got too many videos lined up here, so you don't be afraid to stop me, right? But I'll just show you this thing because it's coming close to it. So this is on Holy Saturday. It's called The Children Dress Up. These are my little ones here at home. So they'll dress up with little masks on them. And I'll pause there for you because we'll run out of time. But it's the little ones literally calling neighbours' houses, getting their eggs on for gugging for eggs. And if you notice things like this, listen, traditions change. You know, you're the headband made from China. You know, that kind of way, right? These are the layers that make us what we are. We're not very precious. If you look back at a lot of our traditions, there's always layers. There's layers built over layers, built over layers, built over layers, right? Right. But one of the key aspects of gugging here was the disguise aspect, right? The little ones don't do it. The bigger ones did it, especially the bigger people. And that was the exact same tradition that would have went over to the States with Halloween, the idea of dressing up. So there's different times you dress up in Ireland. You know, Halloween was the big one, dressing up, where you put on a mask, you call to the neighbours' houses, you get a bit of food. Likewise down for Hunting Duran on St. Stephen's Day, same crack again over the course with neighbours called to neighbours, help each other out. It was a bit of an alms given. They did the same on Billy's night on the 1st of February, and likewise gugging here. And you might get the odd other thing as well for weddings as well, where lads would dress up and cover their faces. So there's a strong tradition, very, very strong. It survived obviously in the States, and I know we're re-importing a version from the States, but it survived in its kind of the true form in some ways. In the likes of Newfoundland, you'll find it where they go Christmas moment, but it's absolutely guaranteed straight out of the southeast of Ireland. That's where it came from, you know. Now you will find cross-European stuff, this kind of stuff here with the girls dressing up. Finland, you look at videos of Easter in Finland, the exact same thing, little things with sticks, little things with eggs, all the exact same. Other little things to point out as well, because we're living in Ireland now where we're beginning to see, I don't have a slide to show you, but we, like my grandmother at home, did always get salt blessed at Easter. And might get butter blessed as well, but salt, and they might, you know, if there were spuds were late to get the seed potato blessed, and it just kind of dipped down, faded down. Loads of things. It's gassed in the bigger scheme of things. When there was a Gaelic folk revival around the world in the 60s with music, I found actually what happened with so many of our traditions, they dipped. music and the folk music rose up with the likes of the Clancy Brothers and the popular folk revival that we were, influenced by America and England. But the traditions like our Maybush tradition, loads of things just took a nosedive, right? Now, maybe because people felt that it was backward, they were more educated, why we were doing this, how kind of crack, and I think now we begin to realize the importance of it socially, the idea of us socially calling to a neighbour's house, because now any of us have been to Ireland, know Ireland, people's lives have become very, very individualistic, the kind of way where we live in our house and we drive to work, so that kind of community thing, it's still very, very strong. But but you still need to work. You need to work on it, like any kind of relationship. You need to work on it to keep those things strong. I think it's in us anyway. To be fair, I think we're a very social animal anyway in Ireland. But those kind of things are a lovely way for neighbours to get together and to meet, whether it's a St. Patrick's Day parade or whether it's a wedding or whether it's calling to your house. So that's what's lovely about that. But it took Polish people who came to Ireland. As some of you will know, in the last 20 years, 25 years, people from Eastern Europe coming to Ireland for work, living in all first, second generation now at this stage. But I noticed that the Polish people get their baskets blessed on that Saturday. And it's just amazing just to watch. And it's taking Polish people to come to Ireland for us to realize, God, just we used to do that, And they do a different version of it. It's different, stronger, a different take on that Easter. But it's just gorgeous. You go into some of the churches here just to witness these baskets full of eggs and breads and cheese and all being blessed like the little ones there. So there's loads of lovely things happening. But as you probably know yourself, sometimes our lives are so busy we don't have time to reflect on them. We just, we're living our lives. So that's the Easter thing. Loads of lovely things around Easter. One of the great things around Easter, which is you probably all know, sure, you have your Easter eggs on Easter Sunday. But one of the things here was you collect your eggs on a Saturday or in the days beforehand, the hen eggs and duck eggs. And there's tons of stuff around that. God Almighty, there was loads of stuff around, an egg that was laid on Good Friday. It was supposed to be a real lucky egg. If you planted anything on Good Friday, it'll grow. And just loads of stuff. If you get an egg, even when you get an egg on Good Friday, put an X on it for a cross on it. Just tons of stuff. The blessed salt on an Easter Sunday morning. But the chocolate eggs that we all eat on Easter Sunday morning now, that most of you will know, and our Easter egg hunts and all that. Here again, you'll find it all over Leinster, East Munster, East Connacht, South Ulster. The tradition of collecting the eggshells up and keeping them for the Maybush. And you'll find that in parts of Kerry, North Kerry, but very strong in this part of the country, the more Leinster, this side of the country. And you will do things like you'll decorate your Maybush. So I know women here up the road from me, or literally now come Easter Sunday, will have bags of eggshells saved up. And then come the 1st of May or the eve of the 1st of May, they'll paint them and hang them up on these Maybushes to welcome the start of summer. So you'll find that with so many of our traditions, there's a fine line runs through so many of them, the kind of continuation runs through them. And you know what, folks? That keeps us going. That keeps the calendar year going. I kind of find that, especially when you're living in the countryside, you need those dates to help you look for. There's something to look forward to. Whether you're practicing Christian or whatever you are, there are those kind of dates that make sense in this kind of northwestern part of Europe. But I could talk for hours. How am I doing there for time? Will I talk about anything else to you at all?
No, you're doing great. I was just thinking when you were saying like how tied into a lot of this is the agriculture, so planting and harvesting and my own neighbour had a big thing on May Eve. It was a great night for pishogues, like that you could put a curse on someone that night. So she would check if anyone buried an egg in her property, because it maybe as the egg rotted, it would kind of degrade their business. Do you have what about bad luck? You're talking about good luck a lot, or what about those bad luck pishogues?
Yeah, there's no end to them. The May Eve egg thing is absolutely really, really powerful, right? I find my strongest area of work is the month of May and the month of Halloween, Belton and Samhain, right? They're the strongest for me, right? Much stronger than St. Patrick's Day, around those stuff there. May is the start of summer, so everything is based around luck. And we put up the Maybush now, and I'll show you photographs of the Maybush. We literally have hundreds of them going up in Wexford due to social media in some ways, right? And people put them up now. You get a white thorn or a skioch, and you put them up with eggshells and ribbons, and they look a little bit hippy-dippy, and people go, aren't they lovely, right? But I can show you a neighbour up the back of the hill here, and they put them up to pishogues to keep the fairies away. It's all about protection of your crop. So when you put up the Maybush, that kept the fairies away. That was the belief, it kept the fairies away. Neighbours here, women out the road, remember lighting fires when the cattle threw them to stop the fairies milking in the field. Woman up the road, this is the classic story. Again, I have a lovely recording of, I've loads of recordings of people talking about this. Was you go up on the May Eve and said that it's all about, come here, it's all about protecting your crop, your profit. Your milk was your profit. Your crop was grown to be planted, right? And he did everything to protect that. So you would do things like, as you said, the neighbors would put eggs in your drilled spuds to bring you bad luck. They put eggs in your boundary ditches to bring you bad luck, right? You would lock the dairy door on that night. You would lock, let me see, Jesus, there's so much stuff around that. Around the classic one was a hare. You get out in the main, you go out in the field and you'd see this woman, you'd see this hare milking, sucking the cows at the tits in the field. And the classic story is this Kitty and the hare stories found all over the country. Was the farmer shoots the hare and the hare gets shot in the hip and runs into an outhouse. And the farmer goes in, and when he knocks on the door to figure out how can he find this, an old woman comes out bleeding from the hip, right? And that's that classic story. The neighbour down only literally 2-3 miles away told me that story that happened to her. I recorded some Irish young traveller girls up in Dublin who told me that story as if it happened only 2 years ago. So that, so some people will tell you a story and they'll recount it and they'll kind of pull themselves out of the story a little bit themselves because they don't want to see, like, I believe this. Well, then some people will tell it to you and they'll go, just this happened to me. You know, that kind of as well.
Yeah. Well, the one we used to do on May Eve too when we were young was if you got up at dawn apparently and bathed your face in the dew, like just at the rising of the sun, that you'd never age or you'd be, gifted with beauty. So I don't know if that's true.
Well, I'm going to tell you it worked, right?
Lovely, yeah, you're hired. I'm really 70.
Yeah. I have a collection over my shoulder here from Tipperary called A Walk in the May Dew. We do the exact same thing in Wexford. You'd walk in the May Dew, you'd wash your face in the May Dew. Now here's the brilliant thing as well. You'd get a cloth and you'd wring the water into a little bottle. It was a cure for sore eyes. And the gas thing is, I'm going over to Newfoundland in a couple of weeks. I was over there back in 2019 recording, and I knew it anyway. But they have it with the May snow. The first May snow that falls, they use that for a cure for sore eyes. So it's really interesting to see some of the stuff that was all the Irish brought straight over. Things you wouldn't do in May. You wouldn't get married in May. You'd rue the day. You wouldn't paint a house in May because you wouldn't, you'd paint all your luck away. There's tons of stuff around May. There was one that a man told me, and a man in Tinryland up the road, and he said that if you get, because you're talking about the luck thing, he said if you wanted to bring bad luck on someone, he said you'd go down to, you get up in the morning, you wouldn't talk to anyone, and you get a knife and you go to a stream. He said you'd cut the stream with the water, and you'd say, I think it was, there's usually saying half for me, half for you. It was a take on that. And it meant you could put bad luck on someone else, but it's absolute complete voodoo or whatever, that kind of crack, that kind of way. And I said, did you do it? And I said, I was in a bad place. And said, I felt like doing it, but I didn't do it. He said he was too afraid, that kind of way. It's unusual for someone to come tell you that. These are all recorded, by the way, folks. All these are recorded. They're up on that page. They're on the Folklore page. Tell you what, we have a lovely tradition as well. And again, let's see, you find it in Tipperary. You'd surely find it in Kerry, of blessing the land on May Eve. You'd find that. They get the holy water from Easter and they bless the land. We had a lovely one where the farmers would bless the land with this thing called Tran water. Do I have time? Will I show you a little video of it? Yeah. There's literally a neighbour down the road. And it's an interesting one because the rituals are interesting in the walking of the land, which are good. Oh, please tell me it's there for me. Tran water. I literally pulled a pile of videos on there for today. And if it's not there, I'll have to tell you all about it myself. Tran water.
It is there. It's up a little bit. Yeah. You've just gone above it. See John Murphy, Tran, yeah.
You're hired. So this is a lovely tradition where friars would come out and they'd sell this thing called Tran water. No one will tell you what a Tran was. They really didn't know what it was. But the idea was you'd bless the land and mark the sign of the cross on the land. You'd beat your boundaries as well. You marked your boundaries. So it's an interesting ritual in the landscape on May Eve, done on May Eve.
Tran water there was friars from New Ross used to come to the local parish every year, in the springtime of the year, and they'd travel around to the houses and they'd bless people that have water, and they'd bless it and make it, bless water for the land water, I suppose it was called, and they'd have another bottle of water then, and they'd have it blessed for stock water, and the farmers would use it then. Like, there was one instance now, my father used it on a field of barley that was after being attacked by worms or trans or whatever they were called at the time, but it was tran water, it used to be called anyway locally. And he just went in and walked casually across the field cornerways and went to the other corner and come back to the gate, and he spread it with a feather out of a bottle, like, and just made the sign of the cross. And when he was coming out in the gate and closed the gate, and it worked out all right anyway. The barley was coming anyway when the harvest time come, and it was seemingly all right, but it didn't look very good at the time that he was spreading it, like. But I was left up to himself, like he could have either tore up or tried this, but sure, them outfellas had to believe anyway that had worked, and so it seemed it did work.
The old fellas had the belief, and it did work. The belief is a powerful thing when you talk to people, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, even that woman, when she was talking with the other lady, she said it happened to herself, that she got kind of stuck in the fairy fort until she turned her clothes inside out. Like,
Yeah.
you know, part of you was thinking, can that really have happened? Or was there drink involved? Or, you know, and yet she seems to believe it, you know. I've met people myself that have had, you know, I couldn't leave the fairy fort, or I wasn't able to get out, or something, you know, happened that was weird in there. It's very strange. Like, I think the power of belief is definitely, you know, a factor. And like, we would have believed all of this absolutely growing up, Michael. I'm sure you would have too, you know, like grandmothers telling you stories and stuff, or old neighbours, you know. Is there anything in your work that people don't like to talk about? I know when I started researching, for instance, the Great Hunger at home, one or two of the older men like refused, and more like, what you want to know about that for, and I know it's kind of maybe off topic for what you do, but even like the mother and baby homes type stuff, you know, like, are there things that people don't want to touch, like, when you're interviewing them?
There are. I tell you, I find it's a funny one. There are things that we just don't value. We don't realize we have. That's one thing for sure. For example, my own grandmother and them, they would have beliefs and things, but they didn't have any value on them. And I'd say, for example, I would have went home one day and said, "Oh, I recorded a man talking about tran water." So I could have told you that. So why did you tell me? Why did be interested in that for, right? So there was definitely that side of it where they didn't value what they had. I found there's content I have recorded. You wouldn't believe the scale of it. Like, if I produce an hour and a half collection of the kids saying Limerick, there could be 3 hours of stuff that you could never use. Content, places where things happened, you couldn't, you know, that's one part of it. But reluctance to talk about things, yeah, certain cases. One of the things which is a strong thing that I kind of only started to unplug myself maybe about 15 years ago. We talk about fairy forts or ras or ring forts, right? And they were where there was loads of reasons why we didn't go near them. There were always cautionary tales why we never went near them. The fairies lived there, right? The fairies were in brackets where you know, was one thing. But I recorded people who would talk about unbaptized children being buried there. That's was like here in Wexford, Tipperary, Mayo, Offaly,
Kerry for sure, yeah.
Kerry for sure. I came across a woman from Tipperary recently who said that she knew that the mother and the child was buried in the ring fort there under there. The mother died and the mother was buried there. That was there. There is content there. I know sometimes when people will tell you stuff, and sometimes you look back when you're editing it, you go, "That's not right yet. It's not right to do it." You know. So I know myself. You know, even relationship stuff. You know, I even mix religion relationships here in Wexford. You know, Catholics and Protestants marrying, and the difficulties families would have had. And there's certain things like that people they'll talk about it, and then they go, "I shouldn't have said that to me." You know, it'll stay on the hard drive or never lead to like a day on tape. You know, I generally find Irish people are good. You know, they're good. I tell you what, they kind of, you probably see it, you know, from when they trust you. I'd never start off, if I'm sitting in an interview with someone, I'd start off with the easy stuff. Calendar, folklore. Oh, did you do this? Did you cancel a person? All this kind of stuff. And then you get maybe 40 minutes, 50 minutes of an interview with someone. And maybe the last 10, 15 minutes, you might start talking beliefs, right? You might say, Jesus, there was a man meddled with a rad near me and he got bad luck. And there was a man down here meddled with a rad. He got bad luck. The wife got cancer and she died. And said the neighbour said, you know, that'll start to come out. But that'll never come out at the start. And I've had folklore students come to me and coming over to me and asking me, will you get people to tell me these, you know, unusual stories and stuff? And people won't tell you that. Irish people, a performer will tell you, like a storyteller. Not a person who goes to a library will tell you these stories because that's what they do. But the ordinary person won't tell you that. They'll be slower at getting to you, you know, because they have to trust you a little bit as well. But yeah, but there's no end to that material. I always love it's really interesting watching back and someone telling you stuff and then telling you when they actually tell you that when they believe it, that's when it's kind of vulnerable. Like, you know, that kind of you're dealing with delicate material and people's beliefs as well.
Yeah.
But it's gorgeous. I love it every day of the week. I love, you know,
And Michael, you were saying like the excuse me, your target audience, you know, is 40, like our own age, but maybe 60 to 90. Like, are we losing it? Like, are your children believing, or do they just do the things because it's a nice tradition with dad? You know what I mean? Like, do you think, are we going to lose it as such in terms of the ritual of doing it? Maybe we'll know that we used to do it, but like, are there things that we won't be doing, you know, in 10 years' time?
Yeah, well, come here to me. Things will always change, and that's one thing we'll always do. But one thing which I always took, and I'm sure the formal academics will hate me for this, right? I don't care less because I'm not from that background, right? Okay, I know where I came from. And I saw, you ever watch a nature documentary and you see this fella filming this only last type of a wildebeest, whatever and he's going to be eaten by a lion, and they're filming it and they're talking, this is the last one in the whole world, and they're watching it going to die, and you know, and they put this sense of privilege on themselves that they're filming this, right? And if I was there now, I'd be one of the fellas who picking up a stone and fecking at the tiger and saying, go on, let me have a chance to live, right?
Yeah.
And whatever way to live, it'll live in some fucking form, right? Whatever you have to crossbreed it with something else, at least it'll live in some form, rather than, you know. And I felt sometimes a lot of the academic kind of, it's positioning, and it's them positioning themselves. Now, I know there's a delicate area there anyway, but when the remove is there, it's different. I'm going to share my screen with you and show you something, right? I'm going to show you how, and I'll come back to your other question about young people, right, in a second. I'm going to show you a live Facebook page. Facebook, I should be working for Facebook, lads. Please stop. Come here to me. Right, we grew up with the Maybush. My other half, her father did it. They didn't do it as children, right? Now the Maybush, as we touched on here, we put up a little bit of a white thorn or a bit of a gorse to keep the fairies away, right? Now it was going on in little pockets around the county, and I was recording it. So a couple of years ago, I started to establish a thing called the Wexford Maybush Festival, right? And literally by social media, local papers, which are brilliant, and local radio, we literally start sharing to people. Listen, lads, put up your Maybush, send it out, snap into us, right? Right. Then we start to. This is this man, by the way, telling me about putting up the Maybush there. Lukey Dorn was his name. Unreal, talking about really. He puts up the Maybush to keep the fairies away. There's nothing hippy dippy now, this guy, right? And what's amazing is that hundreds and hundreds of people Jason do this, and particularly grandparents and parents took it on. So listen, we let it go or carry it on. And they ran with it, right? This is done absolutely voluntary basis. So we have hundreds and hundreds of Maybushes now in Wexford, right, going up, right? And the power of social media has helped that. We'll even get ones over from New York coming up as well. And I just literally is Facebook page, and it comes alive around April and dies then come the end, start of June, and then it'll come back alive again. And another great thing is what we've done is we've actually got little small trees and planted them, and people are taking this one little small white thorn, and you know the power of a lone white thorn in Ireland. No one will touch it, right? And I put a bit of insurance in it, right? And I got like literally hundreds of these free off. They're like worth 20 cents. But the amount of people who would drive up to get this one little tree to grow it with their grandchildren to watch that grow, and they're the ones now who are decorating it. And what will happen in time, I can see it happening. I'm being lost out of the story, but that's okay. You know, that's the job that I've done is to get this going. So to answer your question about keeping things going and me throwing a stone at a tiger, that's an example of watching something die and talking about it. And I see fellas here from national agencies in Ireland writing about the Maybush, and they're still using photographs from the 1950s. And you go, well, you go way out of that, lads. Well, you come on out of that. You get with the program, right? And sometimes they're afraid of people, like people will bite them or something. You know, real people will bite them. So that's something. With regards to folklore and young lads telling stories, come here, there's huge changes in Ireland for sure. But I'm going to show you, I'll end with a little clip with you, and you tell me when you want me to end. And I have a little 4-minute clip of young lads I recorded in a school in Adamstown in Wexford. I could show you 8 minutes of young lads from Limerick as well. It's there, you know, especially in the country areas, it's there. It's there, you know it for sure. In the northern counties, it's still there. One of the biggest things which breaks my heart a little bit is the loss of local accent. That breaks my heart a little bit. I see accents change, complete change. My accent is faster than my father's accent, but I think accents are incredible. You know, I love accents. Obviously, we lament about the loss of language, but I think the loss of accent was all tied in with that as well. And now I meet people, and literally you wouldn't know that they're American accents. I never said a day in America, you know. And not everyone, but it's, you know, it's a global
TV, yeah.
Yeah, and it's also tied in with a bit of a class thing as well. You know, people would position their accents to separate themselves in a different form of class, right? And if you have no country accent, they want the country ones to change. You're going to Dublin to sound posher than they are, and usually it's all tied in with loads of crack. It's, you know, it's probably it's universal. But to me, I remember recording a little at in Limerick years ago, 2004, and he told me a story, and I was looking, you'd be editing it, 42 seconds long. And I met the mother. I said, "Jeez, you didn't told me this lovely story." Oh, yeah. She told me the story. She was 42 or 3 seconds long. And he obviously learned it. So it's the same phrase and the same rise was like a fiddle tune, you know, that kind of way. It's gorgeous. And that to me is as important. And again, you don't get that as much, you know. That to me is lovely, you know. That, you know, anyway, yeah.
I do think that, you know, there's kind of, this speaks to us, I think, a lot. And particularly, like, we both grew up, you know, in rural areas. Like, there is a tie to the land, maybe, like, and there's a tie to place in Ireland that you sometimes might miss, like in cities and things, you know. So I am hopeful myself. Like, I see my own sister, you know, and the biggest thing, Michael, for me is kids are actually starving for it. Like, my sister's 3 kids at home and I love nothing more like than sitting around the bonfire outside on Halloween night and, you know, tell us a story. I don't know how many times they've rang me here in America, you know, tell us a story, because kids that's all they want. You know, and you go through this phase that I remember, like, you know, my grandmother lived with us and you'd be kind of sick of hearing the stories, you know, depending on your age kind of thing, you know, and so it's but I think that kind of, there's a hunger in Irish people, because I think we are tied to the land and to our place and history, that you can see it on the landscape. Like, so you want to know, you know, why aren't we allowed going there, or why don't we talk about, like, we've a famine mass grave in Listowel, you know, and we were brought in there as kids by school, you know, to say prayers, but that kept the stories alive, you know, and because of course we weren't putting up markers to the famine, you know, at the time. So yeah, it's very important. I think the work you're doing is very important. I'll urge our audience, if any of you have questions or comments, to, you know, type them in chat, or you can raise your hand and we might be able to unmute you.
We got treated, it's funny, maybe as we're getting older as well, you see the value of that. You were talking about your sister's children. I kind of find, even like, I put my little ones to bed for years, and I told them about 100 stories regarding my phone, the stories I heard from my mother, and absolute made up complete lies I'd make up for me crack. And it's now field by our house, now flat field, wouldn't be too interested in the field, now flat field, about 3 acres and that. And it was called Donoghue's Field because Donoghue's owned it. But sure, I brought him out. They might have been going to Euro Disney, because I heard all these stories about these magic rabbits and this pig that breathed fire that lives in this, you know, that kind of way. So one of the great things about it all is our imagination fills in all the visuals, and that really pulls us back to that thing. I'm going to hold up something. My other half, Aileen Lambert, she works in traditional song. She's a traditional singer. We'd work on song projects, but she would be a lot more traditional singing. But she's gone into school, and exactly what you're saying about the idea of young lads, there's an absolute hunger, and she's finding it now. She's using the likes of YouTube, and schools are getting really good at this kind of stuff, putting videos up on YouTube of traditional songs, and they're great resources for stuff, for kids to learn stuff. You know, they mightn't get a chance to go they mightn't have that granny that they might have learned it from, but they're still able to get it in there somewhere, whether it's through YouTube or whatever. But we're definitely in a good place. There's a hunger there, and I think we've got great nature in Ireland. Still great nature in this, you know. I think that's
We've had a question here. I associate folklore with the countryside, but is there folklore from the cities? That's a kind of a good question. I suppose, like, some of the cities would have had stories about their place, like Dublin, you know, there's always ghost stories kind of and all of that, and haunted houses and things. But, you know, I suppose it depends how you define folklore maybe, but I think cities do have that kind of story framework going on.
Absolutely, completely. As like, if you just Google "The Banshee Lives in the Handball Alley," that collection from Limerick, that was Limerick City 2004 or 5. absolutely, completely rich young lads telling stories. Oh, again, the Bishop's Lady, the Green Lady, all those
Yeah.
stories.
Oh yeah, they did swamp thing in the river. Yeah.
Yeah,
Some of them
yeah,
were scary actually.
yeah. But in Dublin be the same. Sometimes we associate, but no, completely. I remember recording in Derry as well, same crack again, young lads and
Mm.
stories. So no,
I
yeah,
suppose it might be less tied to the agricultural calendar kind of thing, but it would be very tied to place, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well,
And I suppose ghosts are very important everywhere.
yeah, and one of the things, sorry to interrupt you, one of the things I suppose in the country is we can associate the stories more with the people and the families. And in cities, the way things can get lost in cities because they're so big in towns, But in the country, when you talk about something that was seen up in Donoghue's Lane,
Yeah.
you know the family, and that kind of way. So that
Yeah, it's an immediacy that you kind of don't have if you don't know your neighbours.
Yeah.
We have another one there. Very interesting about Easter from Maureen. Besides the connection between the pumpkin and the turnip, what did children do for Halloween? Did they dress up as particular characters or saints?
Yeah.
No, I was going to say what the old Irish Halloween or Samhain traditions.
Yeah, well, come here. I have a lovely video lined up there. Not lined up, it's there. Of dressing up. Come here to me. The dressing up aspect of it, the disguise aspect is really it's changed right now. We've re-imported the American one, and the early American one. If you look at it, there was a disguise element to it. Then it became kind of fancy dress. You probably it became a different kind of thing where you didn't disguise yourself. Here, especially in this part, like it was very strong in this part of Ireland, the eastern coast, the Halloween tradition. The guising element was of it. And it was a chance for you to dress up and call to your neighbours in disguise. Nowadays, a lot of young lads will dress up, especially in the towns, will dress up and just dress up as anything. They won't dress up to cover their faces up. But you growing up probably, and me growing up, if you dressed up, you put on a mask, you called to your neighbours, they wouldn't give you anything unless you did something.
Yeah.
And you had to get something, right? And there was an exchange. You were brought into the home. In my mother's time, my grandmother's time, I've recorded Granny was born in 1912, and she has accounts from the early 1920s of them, right? Of the older lads getting dressed up, recording about it. It was mostly older adolescent boys and older that dressed up up until about the 1950s. And in Mammy's time, then they changed. So the younger kids were starting going out, kind of like teens, whatever, right? But it was most of the older guys going out in the past, right, whatever. But I have a lovely video of my mother. I filmed her for 10 years. Every year, Mammy would get dressed up and call to Granny, and Granny didn't know who she was. And this was a big joke. This is a big joke as when we were kids, right? Yeah. Now, and I went out in 2005, and she was still doing it. I said, "Oh, jeez, I can't believe she's still doing this crack, right?" And I filmed it, and they ignored me with the camera. And I filmed it for 10 years before both of them died, right? And I just have this lovely record, but it's lovely because she's calling into the house. And on Granny's deathbed, I told her, I said to her, "Do you know who was calling up to you all that time?" And I said, "No," because I brought my little ones in, dressed up to see her. I said, "It was Mammy who was calling up." And she says, she says, "Where's that?" And so that was it. But I have that caption. But what's lovely, come here to me, and I hope your listeners will get this right, is I actually like the mix of used to put old gloves on old stockings on their hands. The women dressed up as men. They put humps on their backs. You change your voice. The men became women. There was a great bit of a gender play going on there as well. And you like nowadays in my mother's time, they put an old pound shop mask on them. Mask was made in China or Taiwan and throw it on. But they're part of the layers. I think if we get too traditional about it, too reserved in our things, it won't. I've always a fear with that sometimes of people taking traditions and trying to frame them and freeze them in time. That's not going to happen,
And Michael, was that done to, in the ancient, we'll call it, or the older Celtic time, was it done to protect yourself because, they believed the veil between the living and the dead was thinner? So, like, if you dressed up or you weren't recognizable as alive, kind of, you'd be safe, Is that genuinely what it was from, or?
Yeah, well, come here to me. That's the story that goes around, right?
Yeah.
That's a story. I remember Peter Kennedy recorded that story in the Isle of Man. It's been recorded here, the idea that the living can, like, Mammy in a story. Now, sometimes what happens is with folklore, we're all trying to understand everything, and we're all going to go back to the ancient, distant past, and we put on the Celtic fog machine as well, and to mix it all up, right? But sometimes those things are not. They don't all go back to 3,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, right? The moment idea of dressing up, mumming, from next door neighbours, the Welsh do it, the English do it, the mainland Europeans do it, right? So there's element of dressing up and guising around. That's across all islands, right? That's an interesting one even to watch where these things developed, right?
Mm-hmm.
As for the belief of the dead, for sure, that was a belief that the dead came back. There was a belief that around that time of year, and that's why we have All Souls Day, people will tell you, like my mother always said that, oh, Jesus, you can do anything on that night. There was no rules. They said, some people would say that the puka was out that night or someone was out that night, he'd take you, right? So there was this idea that there was stuff going around. Like I would have absolutely the most gorgeous material recorded around All Souls Day, which is 2 days after Halloween night. It was a Christian day added onto it. Just, again, another layer. But what's lovely is, and you probably remember this in Kerry, lighting the candle, leaving it out for the souls to come in. People believed that the dead came back that night. My grandmother spoke about leaving a firelight, leaving a little bowl of water, leaving a towel and a bit of food out for the souls, the door open for the souls to come back in. I recorded traveller women who said they used to go to bed at night time. And this is the turnip one. This is an interesting one. This isn't the ancient lost in time stuff. A lot of people would put the candle that night in a bucket of sand or a carved spud or a big turnip, literally to stop it falling over, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's a lot of stuff now about the ancient jack-o'-lantern going back since time began. A lot of it was, I'd say, it was a very simple, practical thing to hold the candle, right? And I remember recording traveller women the same, and they were saying that leave it outside the tent and the firelight, and they wouldn't be let go out. That's what she said to me. The father wouldn't let him go out that night to walk around because the souls are walking around and he'd interfere with the souls. So there's a kind of a cross. There's a great, people believe that the souls came back that night, which, come here to me, whether you believe in ghosts around that kind of crack, I suppose one of the real kind of things for me and for a lot of people would be they like the idea as a moment in the year to remember the dead, to remember your parents.
And to maybe have that reconnection, maybe, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
And can I ask you, we just got a question too, the most haunted house in Ireland apparently is in Wexford, in Loftus Hall. What have you discovered about that?
Jeez, will you stop? It's the same stories.
My great grandmother used to tell stories about that. She was from Waterford and she came married into Kerry and had stories about that house,
Yeah, that same story you found in Castletown House. The ones in Loftus Hall I give out to me now for saying this, but that story is found around the country. What is really interesting for me for that, come here, like, take the stories all with a pinch of salt. It's a really interesting one when you think about it from an Irish part. Put on your cultural tourism hat here now for a second. Isn't it mad when you think about it? You had a big house and, look, every county's got big houses, and the reason why it became, now I think it's changed hands now, it's gone through different owners now, but for a good spell there for a couple of years it was full of tourists going down because of the story. So it shows you the power of the bit of folklore.
Big time. They recorded a horror movie in it, I thought, well, and it had been a convent, I think, for a while before that, but apparently that bit in the roof was never fixed despite all the exorcisms and stuff. I mean, I think I'd be afraid to visit. But that might just be, I'm too gullible. Somebody on YouTube said that your wife's book is beautiful. She loves having it in her collection, so that's lovely. So you don't believe the Loftus Hall? Were you ever in it?
No, I passed by it a few times. No, I was never in it. I wasn't. Ara, come here to me. Yeah, listen, what
you don't believe in ghosts, I'd say, do you?
Oh, no, God, no, come here to me. No, I didn't say that now, right? What I said was, what I love, actually, maybe it's just in me as well, right? I actually love how a story exists without a big building or without a big place. And this is sometimes people trying to get head around this. I have a lovely recording of two men here. I could show you as well, of two men talking about an old bridge that the Banshee was singing, and this place was haunted. And sometimes it's the most ordinary, non-place that have these stories, that kind of way, And I'd probably be kicking away from a big building, to be honest. It's just the way I'm programmed. I'd much prefer, just the non-spaces. I remember a man, we were doing a mapping-based project, and he wasn't from Wexford. He came with me, and he says, we were walking through fields, looking at the oaks and fields, and walking to one field, second field, third field, and he said, there's 12 Cromwellian soldiers buried over in that corner of that field. And he took me aside, he said, you're taking me to fields to see nothing. I said, you're dead fucking right. I said, I am taking you to fields to see nothing, but the woman told you there's 12 fellas buried there. But right. And he couldn't get he was expecting the bells and whistles. He was expecting the experience. He was expecting the interpretive center. And that's he'll never get that, and that's the power of the story, that's the power of that kind of that connection to place that you talked about, that connection to landscape, just to the fields and the ditches and the boughs and the gaps in the road, and the bends in the roads that were haunted. That to me is really rich, and I always keep thinking I have a great belief in finding out more about ourselves before we try to sell it to other people. Kind of a great belief in that. Settling in who we are ourselves first.
Yeah. No, well, do you want to end with the video, Michael? Just in
Sure,
case.
will I stick on the way? Yeah, will we do it?
Do it, yeah, absolutely.
Actually, there's no end.
We don't have any other questions.
Oh, Grant, sure, come here. What will I show you at all, eh? I'm looking here on my desktop here. There's no end of stuff to show you. Okay. Oh, I will. I'll end on a funny note with you, I think.
I hope people are understanding. I hear what you're saying about the accents, but
yeah,
I can understand them.
Good.
Lovely turn of phrase people have too, isn't it?
Oh, it's gorgeous, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Come here to me. I won't. I'm not going to end with something funny. I'll end with this lovely story. This man here. We talk about landscape, right? And I suppose that deep connection to landscape and a respect for that landscape, that place. And you touched on it earlier on. We were talking about fairies. For the listeners here, we have things called raheens, we call them, other people call them a dune or a list, or little circular enclosures. When the Anglo-Normans came, they squared them. You're talking 12, 13, 1400s, but there were enclosures from about the 3rd, 4th century. I think that's when they were. But over time, people said they were the places where the fairies lived, and the fairies were associated with these places, and you wouldn't touch them. And as we touched on earlier on, we said that sometimes, not always, you might get a place where there was someone buried there. I came across recently as well where there were guns buried there during the trouble times. It was the right place to bury guns, right? Lads wouldn't, during the War of Independence, I came across Mountain Tipperary, tell me where there were supposed to be guns buried after the War of Independence. So there's loads of reasons why we didn't touch them. And obviously the belief is, well, the fairies, and I suppose, what they were simply enclosures where people lived. That's what they were, right? They were just enclosures. And over time, like the haunted house down the road, the derelict house that took on stories, these things took on stories, but they're spread all over Ireland. You'll find them in Newfoundland as well. It's interesting. I know of fairy rings in Newfoundland, and they did not have these enclosures, but they brought the same folklore with them, and then they just planted it on a different landscape, but they brought the stories in their head. Now this classic story, this is the most gorgeous man, gorgeous accent, Seamus Boland, and he's talking about this round mound behind him. And he just talks about why he wouldn't meddle with it. And I'll end with this with you because it's absolutely lovely. And his reason why he wouldn't meddle with it. This was recorded late one evening. So the video is a bit dark.
Seamus, we're in the Townsend of Palace, isn't that right?
That's correct, yeah.
What's behind you at all?
A moat. And I was told that there's a tunnel from that moat to one up the road. It's about a quarter of a mile up the road. Now, that's what I was told.
And that's in the Townsend of Palace?
Palace also, yeah, Palace Floor.
And that's a circular moat here behind you, is that right?
Yes.
And I noticed you've got a fence around it.
That's the sheep. I wouldn't let the cattle in on it. The sheep goes in all right on it. And I was told that years ago that whoever was in this place, they went about leveling it at the lower side, and they had 2 ewes coupled. And they went out the next morning and they got the 2 ewes hung on a small branch of a bush, little branch of a bush.
That was a warning.
That was all. That they didn't touch it. They didn't do any more. I had to frighten them.
And that probably goes the same for raheens as well. You'd never meddle with a raheen either.
Oh no, I wouldn't anyway. No, I've heard of a man. He drained the bog and there was a raheen in it, and he levelled the raheen and he went down. A couple of years after, he had a cow near Cav, and he went down at 11 o'clock in the summer's evening, and there was a little red man in the field where the raheen was, and he got a fright of his life.
Left it.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And that's probably close by as well, or give or take.
Well, it's about probably 2 miles from here. I'm not going to mention now that. Yeah.
And people believed that years ago. Your parents probably believed that.
Oh, they did. Yeah, they wouldn't put. Well, I believe it as well now. Because them stories that frighten you.
And it's not worth a chance.
No.
Not worth a chance.
No.
And people wouldn't even put sticks out of them or take it.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't. No. Don't think I would. If there was a branch fell on the electric wire, I would have to cut it off. That's the only thing. But I wouldn't take it away. I'd throw it in there.
That'll be there now till the day you die, I'd say, will it?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Because now my son James, he knows that too, like, so he wouldn't interfere with anything on it either.
And we'll end with that gorgeous story, lovely man.
Well, you've set me up perfectly for a reminder to our members that are living near Albany that we have Mancon Megan coming on the 5th of April, who's going to be giving his show Oran Agasim, or Bread and Butter. And it's exactly that. He's going to talk about the language and some of the words that we've lost from the Gaelic language, which are totally tied into, you know, how we manage the land and certain practices and things. So, and you kind of mentioned it earlier on with between the accents and the language. There's a whole wealth of kind of pastoral knowledge and historic knowledge, you know, that's going out. So Anita from Ontario says many thanks. That's great. Lovely to see people from she's by way of Carnew and County Wicklow. But it's funny, you know, who tunes in, yeah. So from Ontario and Canada, that's amazing. So we're delighted to have you, and I would encourage everyone, like, as I say, we have the calendars in the store, Michael, as you know, and John Cannon raised his hand. I think he's just saying goodbye though. And make sure you tune in, you know, your Facebook page. I follow it myself. I've seen those little boys from Limerick because my grandmother was from Limerick, so that, you know, I have a very soft spot for that one. But your Facebook page is fabulous. It's a treasure trove. And thank you very much for being with us tonight. And thank you everyone for joining in. I appreciate that it's very late for you there. So, and I apologize for my, Siobhan says she loves the calendars on the Facebook page too. Siobhan, one of our members. So apologies for my voice. I'm fighting a summer or a spring cold. We hope that's all it is. And thank you again, Michael, very much. Good night to you all. And a happy Easter, I suppose, is coming. So we'll be getting ready for our May Eve traditions. And I hope to see, we might do a bush down in the museum. That'd be great.
Brilliant. Let's do it. Yeah. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, good one.
Good night, folks.
Take care. Good night. Call us off. Good night, everyone. Thank you.